Free at last. The families of two men imprisoned in North Korea celebrate their homecoming. Bishops in Baltimore. U.S. bishops meet for the first time since the Vatican Synod on the Family. Fall of the Wall. Pope Francis marks 25th anniversary with a call for a culture of encounter, solidarity, and peace. And cyber attacks skyrocket. Hackers need only a little access to get a lot of data from the U.S. government. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Monday, November 10th, 2014. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. Religious liberty, marriage and the family, protecting life. American bishops are tackling these issues and more at their fall meeting in Baltimore this week. Wyatt Goolsby is there tonight. Wyatt?
Yes, Brian, nearly 300 bishops from across the country are here in Baltimore tonight discussing not only the topics that you mentioned, but a whole host of other issues related to the Catholic Church here in the U.S. Every fall, American church leaders gather together to pray and to discuss issues facing the church in the United States. They're hearing presentations about underserved Catholic schools, how Catholic hospitals should approach Obamacare, and changes to the liturgy. But this week's meeting has been dominated by discussion of the recent Vatican summit on how the church should minister to families. That meeting made headlines last month. Some media painted a picture of division related to so-called gay marriage and communion for divorced and remarried Catholics. Today, Archbishop Joseph Kurtz fielded questions about how the Synod is playing out here at home. What would you say is changing about the church in terms of approaching all these issues about family and marriage?
I think there is a certain tale of two synods in some ways. I think in genuineness, people were eager to bring things to some conclusion. I think there's something very natural to do that. And so the more we can emphasize, I guess at this gathering especially, that we are still engaged in a process.
That process of supporting the family and marriage will continue in another synod next year. But one of the first items on the to-do list today was discussing the focus of Pope Francis' pontificate and how they can respond to his leadership.
It was fascinating because there were so many aspects of the themes that Pope Francis has brought forward, starting with the good news of the family, to his stressing from the very beginning the mercy of God, the church herself as the image that he used as the church as a field hospital. The bishops will continue to focus on many of these themes, not just tonight, but throughout this week. The Fall Assembly wraps up on Thursday, and between now and then, the members of the clergy have a full schedule. Brian?
All right, thank you, Wyatt Goolsby in Baltimore. And of course, we'll continue to follow the fall meeting of bishops from Baltimore throughout the week. Los Angeles Archbishop Jose Gomez, our guest from the Fall General Assembly of the USCCB. What would you say is the top priority of this meeting, Your Excellency?
I think obviously we're going to talk about the Synod of Bishops, extraordinary Synod of Bishops that happened in Rome just this past month. But also we have a number of liturgical issues that we are working on. So I think there are several things. We had a really nice presentation this morning about Catholic schools too.
There's been a lot of talk after the Synod on the Family, and some are even saying that there is division among bishops over some of the things that were discussed. What is your sense of that, and will that impact the meeting there in Baltimore?
No, we had a report about the Synod this morning, and I think it was clear by the bishops who attended, the cardinals and bishops that attended the Synod, that there was perfect unity. And you know, obviously in the Synod process, just the process itself helps bishops to talk about the issue and what are the challenges that we have in the church and in the world with marriage and the family. But my impression for what the cardinals and bishops reported this morning is that there was unity there, and everybody is looking for best ways to serve the people and minister to the people, strengthening marriage and the family.
Well, you're the spiritual leader of millions of Catholics in Los Angeles, and many of them are immigrants. How does the church do in dealing with immigrants and reaching out to them and meeting their needs?
Well, obviously in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, we have people from all over the world. We have Mass in 42 languages, and a lot of them, as you said, are immigrants. So our parishes are always reaching out to people. And I think what Pope Francis is asking us to do is precisely that, to go out for ordinary way of doing things, to reach out for people and bring them the good news of the gospel, through especially that culture of encounter that Pope Francis talks about. So we are always welcoming and open to all the immigrants, and the church in Los Angeles, the Archdiocese, is really serving the people where they are.
Well, Your Excellency, Archbishop Jose Gomez with the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, thank you for the update on the General Assembly going on in Baltimore, and we hope that you'll join us again soon.
Thank you. I will let you all.
Chad Pecknold is here shortly with more on the General Assembly and some key Vatican appointments as well. He's a church commentator and professor of theology at Catholic University of America. Now some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. The last 2 Americans held captive in North Korea are home tonight. Jason Calvi reports on the secret effort to secure their release.
Since 2012, American Kenneth Bae served hard labor in North Korea. The 44-year-old is a father of 3 and a Christian missionary. He was leading a tour when North Korea charged him with plotting to bring down the government. Matthew Miller was arrested in North Korea in April. Authorities there accused him of planning to infiltrate prison. On Saturday, Bae and Miller returned to American soil and finally hugged their families once again.
It's been just amazing blessing to see so many people being involved, getting me released for the last 2 years.
North Korea wanted a high-ranking U.S. official to negotiate for the Americans' release. The White House sent James Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence.
I'm incredibly thankful to Jim Clapper for the efforts that he made, and I couldn't be happier for the families as we enter into the holidays to know that their loved ones are back.
Kenneth Bae's sister has long pushed the government to help bring her brother back.
It's just hard to believe this day is finally here. For 2 years it's been just unbelievable agony and unspeakable.
Bae and family celebrated his release with pizza, one of the many things he's missed being away for so long.
It's been amazing 2 years. I learned a lot, I grew a lot, lost a lot of weight in a good way, but I'm standing strong because of you.
The other American recently released from North Korea, Jeffrey Fowle, says he'd think twice about what landed him in North Korean jail, that is leaving a Bible behind. He says it wasn't wrong, but it did lead to some hard times for him. Now, the White House and President Obama both saying that North Korea needs to abandon its nuclear program, says releasing these detainees doesn't give it a free pass. Reporting here at the White House, Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
Fireworks in Beijing as world leaders attend the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Conference. President Obama is there. He announced a new visa expansion between the U.S. and China. He also noted disagreements on human rights, democracy protests in Hong Kong, and cybersecurity. We're told the president is meeting other world leaders and working on a Pacific trade deal with them. The Obama administration weighs in on the future of the Internet today. In a video statement, the president said Internet providers should be regulated like utility companies, such as phone and electric services. The FCC is considering if Internet providers can operate with different types of services, like fast and slow lanes on the Internet. Telecom companies say making deals with content providers for better access actually helps users. The White House maintains users who can't afford to pay higher rates for faster service could be locked out. The White House is lowering expectations for the number of people who will sign up for the government's health insurance plan. Window shopping has just begun, but a Health and Human Services estimate says somewhere between 9 and 10 million people will sign up for the plan. That is down from an estimated 13 million by a congressional think tank. Various groups, including EWTN, are challenging the law over mandates about birth control and abortion-inducing drug coverage. Well, on the eve of Veterans Day, the VA's new chief announces an agency overhaul. Secretary Robert McDonald says it's the largest restructuring in the VA's history. The goal is to increase access to services for the nation's 22 million veterans. The VA came under intense scrutiny after reports that vets may have died while waiting for care at the Phoenix VA hospital. McDonald wants to complete this overhaul, dubbed My VA, in just 1 year. Winter hits the upper Midwest early this year, with people now bracing for heavy snow and plunging temperatures. Meteorologists are tracking the next wave of winter weather. It's dipping out of Canada and is expected to dump an early load of snow across much of the Midwest by Tuesday.
It's now going to be diving down to the south already, down to the south and then to the east. So if that cold air isn't by you yet, don't worry, it's coming.
Even people in parts of the Lone Star State could feel the impact. While most of the snow is expected to cover northern states, the cold snap could bring unseasonably low temperatures for an estimated 200 million people.
Montana and South Dakota will not get above 0 later on this week. 0. That'll be the high of the day.
There will be a few lucky parts of the country. Forecasters predict places like Milwaukee and Chicago will see more rain than snow. Temperatures there should also be relatively mild. The remnants of a Pacific cyclone could be to blame for this bizarre weather. The storm rammed into the jet stream, causing it to whip south, dragging cold air down with it.
You know, I love winter. I hate getting to winter, right?
With another Arctic blast expected next week, folks across North America are bracing for an early taste of winter. Coming up, 25 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall, Pope Francis pushes for more cultural connections. On EWTN News Nightly, it is Monday, the 10th of October. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. In Israel, tensions are high following two stabbings that targeted a soldier as well as a small group in the West Bank. Police say an attacker jumped from a car and stabbed 3 people waiting for a bus near a West Bank settlement. The attacker was shot by a security guard. 1 woman died from her injuries. Now, the earlier attack happened in Tel Aviv. A soldier was stabbed and is in serious condition. That suspect was arrested. Tensions between Israeli Jews and Israeli Arabs have been high after a series of attacks and those Gaza clashes earlier this year. Well, Sunday marked 25 years since the Berlin Wall came down, paving the way for the fall of communism in Eastern Europe. Tens of thousands gathered at the iconic Brandenburg Gate to celebrate. 7,000 balloons were released into the night sky, recalling November 9th, 1989. That's when thousands of people from the communist East streamed through the wall, which had divided the city. Lech Wałęsa and Mikhail Gorbachev, the former leaders of Poland and the Soviet Union, attended Sunday's celebration. Pope Francis highlighted St. John Paul II's role in helping to bring down the wall. He reminded the crowds gathered for his Sunday Angelus of the long and arduous efforts of so many who fought to bring an end to communism. He prayed for a culture of encounter, saying we need bridges, not walls. Pope Francis also took to Twitter on the anniversary. He tweeted, "I ask all people of goodwill to help build a culture of encounter, solidarity, and peace. Hashtag FOTW25. That hashtag stands for Fall of the Wall 25. Well, we seldom see him in public, but this weekend, Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI sat down with an official from Rome's North American College.
He is in fantastic health, and his mind is as sharp today and perhaps even sharper than when he was the great theologian and the great Pope that we knew him as.
Monsignor Figueredo says the Pope Emeritus gave him his white zucchetto, or skull cap. You see it right there. He tells EWTN News Nightly it's an example of Benedict's humility, and he will treasure that gift. Well, new Vatican appointments have now been confirmed. American Cardinal Raymond Burke is named patron of the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. He had been the head of the Apostolic Signatura, or the Holy See's Supreme Court. Archbishop Dominique Mamberti succeeds Cardinal Burke as the new prefect. He's a French-Moroccan archbishop who's been serving as the Secretary for Relations with States. And Liverpool native Archbishop Paul Gallagher replaces Mamberti. Gallagher becomes the first native English-speaking Vatican foreign minister. Good to welcome back Dr. Chad Pecknold, an associate professor of theology at Catholic University of America. Some call the appointment of Burke a demotion because he has apparently clashed with Pope Francis on some issues. What's your take on that?
My take is it's a nice headline, but it doesn't jive with the facts. The fact is that the prefect is a 5-year term. And if you go back, you'll see that everybody who's served as prefect has served for 5 years, some for 6 years, and Pope Francis kept Cardinal Burke in for 6 years. So that looks to me like a successful term.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you made that clear. Now, with Mamberti taking over at the Apostolic Signatura, does that say anything about the pontificate of Pope Francis, that appointment?
I think what it says is that there's no ideology at all in the Holy Father that he's moving people up through the ranks. That Memberte was number 3, and now he's number 2 at the Vatican. He was a perfect fit to bring his kind of civil law training and his canon law training together as the Church begins to think through the questions of the relationship between civil marriage and sacramental marriage. And so he's really the perfect person to move up.
On the heels of the Synod, a lot of secular media speculating that there's a lot of division now with the bishops meeting in Baltimore. Is there a division between Pope Francis's emphasis on mercy and those who would put more emphasis on church doctrine?
Yeah, I think that's another headline that you see a lot, a kind of headline of division. I suppose it's true on some level for all of us that we're all adjusting to Francis, and so to expect that the bishops wouldn't be adjusting to Francis would be strange. I think they're adjusting very well. I watched the General Assembly today, and they were constantly referencing Pope Francis and his their praise for his culture of accompaniment and his culture of encounter, his culture of witness. And I think he is their kind of lodestar for thinking about questions of religious liberty, for marriage, and especially now, I think, for thinking about how questions of marriage touch on questions of the poor and the economic pressures that are facing marriage today.
And it's so important to point out that this is really the beginning of a year-long process on these issues that came up at the Synod.
That's right. We've got the colloquium in Rome that the Pope has sponsored on marriage, and then we, of course, have the World Meeting of Families to come, and then the Ordinary Synod. So we have a lot of thinking to do as a church, and I think the Pope and the U.S. bishops are very keen to have the church's thinking as a witness to the truths of the faith and the truths about marriage.
Well, it should be an interesting year, and we hope that you'll stay with us and come back and talk more about it. Dr. Chad Pecknold from Catholic University of America.
Thank you very much.
Up next, do careless workers open the door to cyber attacks on government computer networks? We take a look. On Monday, October 10th, that would be November 10th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with EWTN News Nightly. And the age-old Postal Service falling victim to a new method of attack: hackers. The Post Office believes its computer network was breached in mid-September. It says the hackers may have stolen employees' names, birth dates, and social security numbers. Customers should not be affected by this unless they dealt with the Post Office call center. The service employs about 800,000 people. The FBI is investigating. The U.S. government spends about $10 billion a year to counter growing cybersecurity threats, but the Associated Press reports that's not enough to keep the bad guys at bay. Susie Pinto looks at some of the challenges.
America is under attack, an ongoing cyber attack.
This is war. There's no other way to really describe it.
The U.S. intelligence community says these kind of attacks are the #1 threat to the U.S. This is inside one of the nerve centers trying to combat the daily barrage. The threats have increased in recent years as we get more and more interconnected.
Whether it's games or automobiles or access to information or learning, all that creates more things that are connected, and that has grown faster than previous risk calculations in security investments were growing.
The Associated Press reviewed the numbers, finding that cyber incidents targeting federal networks grew 70% since 2009. Now it's up to former hackers to help shore up the system. One is Mark Mayfrit. 10 years ago, the government raided his home for breaking into its computers. Now he runs a security firm to help stop those kind of attacks.
The government's, like most other things, very, very slow moving, and they're very slow moving to adopt new technologies, new security standards.
But government employees open the door to over half of the attacks, clicking on malicious links or leaving their cell phones unattended. The hackers just need a little access to get a lot of data.
Once you're at this level of introspection into the app, being able to look into the data, the methods, the entire architecture of the app, you have full control.
One approach the government hopes will prevent more attacks: recruiting young programmers into a cybersecurity career. Susie Pinto, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Susie. And the Supreme Court plans to review how tax credits apply to the Affordable Care Act. With no disagreement between lower courts on this issue, the justices themselves initiated the review. That's kind of unusual. There is now a disagreement between different federal appeals courts about redefining marriage, so that means the Supreme Court is likely to tackle that controversial issue. Amy Howe is an editor and reporter for SCOTUSblog, a website written by law experts focusing on the Supreme Court. Are you surprised the High Court is taking on Obamacare without lower courts disagreeing?
A little bit, but the Supreme Court certainly can take on important issues when it wants to, and this is obviously an important issue. The challengers made the case very strongly to the Supreme Court. In essence, you're going to have to deal with this issue now, at some point, and you might as well go ahead and do it now. Because billions of dollars are being spent. People are sort of arranging their lives and their businesses under the premise that these subsidies will be available.
Should the should the Obama administration be concerned about the future of Obamacare?
They should be, I think. You know, this is an essential part of how the system would work under the Affordable Care Act. And you get the sense that you need 4 justices for the Supreme Court to take up the issue. So you know that you have 4 who are likely to want to strike down this IRS rule that provides these subsidies. So they really just need 1 more vote. And the language of the statute is written in a way that you can certainly imagine 5 justices saying, look, this is the way that Congress wrote it. If there's a problem here and the Affordable Care Act isn't going to work, Congress needs to fix that, not us.
So which justice are you watching for that swing vote?
You know, it's interesting because the last time we saw the Affordable Care Act, it was the Chief Justice, John Roberts, who was the swing vote. Justices Kennedy, Scalia, Thomas, and Alito were the dissenters in that case, and they made no bones about the fact that they were not fans of the Affordable Care Act. So I would be looking at the Chief Justice who stepped in and voted to uphold the individual mandate last time, and whether or not he's willing to do so again this time around.
So when the Supreme Court recently convened, it made headlines because it was not going to take up the issue of so-called gay marriage and the bans on that. Now that there is a lower court disagreement, the Cincinnati court voted the other way. So there is a disagreement now. Do you expect now the High Court will address it?
I think so. I think now it's just a question of whether or not they'll do it before this current term ends at the end of June, because as you say, now there's this disagreement among the lower courts, and it really means, for example, that if you live in Indiana where same-sex marriage is now permissible, but if you go across the river a couple miles in Kentucky, it's not, and that's exactly the kind of thing that usually prompts the Supreme Court to step in.
And finally, Amy, with 2 years left in his administration, a lame duck president, he's got a Republican-controlled Congress, the Senate especially now. How does that affect the president's ability to make judicial appointments? And these are so critical to a presidency.
They are. I think you'll see an effort over the next few weeks by Democrats to try and get as many nominees through as possible while they still control the Senate. I don't think it's going to be easy, but they're going to try. And then after that, it's going to become very hard. Senator Charles Grassley, who's likely to be the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee in the new Congress, said today that he's not going to obstruct all nominees, that he will be supportive of consensus nominees. But I think there may be very different views on the 2 sides of the aisle about what a consensus nominee is.
And of course, that affects the way the president picks nominees to try to find a consensus nominee. Amy Howe with SCOTUSblog, thanks so much for your insight.
Thanks for inviting me.
Well, finally tonight, birthday greetings to the few, the proud, the Marines. It's their 239th birthday. The U.S. Marine Corps was founded in 1775 when the Continental Congress established this fighting force. Today, also the 60th anniversary of the dedication of the Marine Corps War Memorial, also known as the Iwo Jima Memorial. It's located just outside Washington and depicts 6 Marines raising the U.S. flag over Mount Suribaki during World War II. So until tomorrow on Veterans Day, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, watch again on EWTN's YouTube page. It is a federal holiday, but we'll be here for all of us at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. Thanks for watching tonight. Good night and God bless you.